Do you want to catch big carp like this? Well, believe it or not, I've caught it just using 10p's worth of bait. The beauty of this method is the fact it's not complicated at all, and if you get the few key points right, you can have a brilliant day's fishing. In the early spring months, the water's usually a little bit cold and quite clear, especially when we've just come out of the winter months. So where you actually fish down the margins is very important. The carp won't look to be feeding in really shallow water, so I've found a little bit of a middle ground between the deepest part of the lake and the shallowest to be the best. So I'm going to be using a 30-gram plummet. It's quite a heavy plummet really for a commercial, only fishing up to say 13 metres, but the reason why I like a 30-gram plummet is it gives you a really true reading of what's on the bottom, and I'm looking for a hard bottom, somewhere where the fish come in, they can spot my bait clearly, and I think you get a really nicer, cleaner bite when the bottom is firm. If you're fishing into silt, I just think you're asking for trouble. So 30-gram plummet, first key point, very important. Another one, to save yourself a little bit of time, do some research on the venue that you're fishing. So if you don't know how deep it is, ask a few people, what's the depth like, and anything to save yourself a little bit of time. And another tip, I'm going to be fishing around 3 or 4 metres out from the bank, so to save myself, I don't know, shipping and out, all I have to do is just put it in straight in front of me around about 3 metres out, get the depth right sort of there, and that'll give me a bit of a better read about what's going to be happening where I'm actually fishing. Now the water's starting to warm up, carp are going to be looking towards the margins, going to be looking for food, but they're not going to be feeding in really shallow water because the water's a little bit clear, still got a nip to it, just coming out of the winter months. So I've found like a medium depth of around 3-4 foot just going into a bottom of a slope to be brilliant. And always look to fish towards cover as well. Carp absolutely love cover, they feel a bit confident there, and you'll definitely catch more consistently. So if you've got a nice next peg platform, that's a brilliant one, or an overhanging tree, anything like that, are brilliant areas to target. So take your time when you're doing this, and make sure you've got a lovely little area where you're fishing and you're confident that you can feed your bait. There we go, hopefully you can see that on camera, starting to come up lovely there. So if I drop this, that's the bottom of the slope now, so there it's deeper, as in my pole float's fully under the water, and if I drag it to my left, it's starting to come up shallower, so I'm at the bottom of that slope there. That's absolutely brilliant. And another tip I'll give you, make sure you either fish to the end of a section, like I've got it right underneath my elbow, or if it's halfway along your section, get yourself some pole tape and put some pole tape on your pole, because you've got to be mega accurate and set a little trap. When you're targeting big carp in the margins, the rig that you use needs to be well balanced, but the most important part of the rig, it needs to be durable. Kicking off with the elastic choice, I've got a red hydro, which when this stuff comes out to play, you know it's party time, and this is the elastic I use for 99% of my short pole and margin work when I'm targeting big carp, because it's nice and soft when it first comes out, but then it powers up and you've got a lot of control. And when you couple it with a 2.4 metre carp power kit, you've got a lot of elastic in there. You'll be very surprised. But the key thing that I'll say is you don't use too light of elastic, because you might only get an hour and a half to 2 hours of the margin fishing at this time of year, so you don't want to be playing fish for ages. Then running down to the rig, I've got 019 N-gauge mainline, very durable stuff. And the top part of my rig, I've got a number 8 microcube there that's acting as a back shot. That's going to keep my rig right in place and very accurate over my loose feed, so I'm going to set a perfect little trap. And I've got around about a foot of line between my pole tip and my float, and my float is a 0.5 of a gram JL. Got a nice thick visible hollow plastic bristle that's not going to fly under, with line bites and show me any false indications. When I do get a bite on this bristle pole float, it's usually going to be a real fast million-mile-an-hour bite, which is what you're looking for. And on the subject of the float, just use a really durable float that's got a nice thick fiberglass stem, really durable foam body. It's not going to let you down. You don't want any part of your rig to let you down, and that JL is the ultimate deeper water margin float in my opinion. Then running down to the rig, and the bottom of my shot, like my shotting pattern, I've got a bulk and one dropper. So I've got 5 number 8 micro shot there that's going to act as that bulk. I'm going to pin everything down, and then around about 10 inches below that I've got a number 8 micro shot right next to my loop to loop connection, which attaches my hook length. So I've got 0.17 engage hook length, and that's 6 inches long to a 12 excess spade hook. That's my number 1 hook when I'm targeting big carp, whether it be down the edge or on a short pole. It's got a lovely wide gape and a really long point, which is perfect when you're fishing with baits like single, double corn, but most importantly, it's up to the job of landing these big powerful carp. Handy little tip whenever you're doing any sort of pole fishing, make sure you've got a reference point on your pole that tells you where the depth is. So if you do have any issues, you hook up on the snag or anything like that, or if your float moves, you'll know about it. So all I've done is I've plumbed up to the bottom of the body of the pole float, and I've put a piece of pole tape exactly where the right depth is. So if anything does happen, you know, I have a problem, you can instantly come back, put a new hook length on and find the exact same depth which you plumbed up on. It just saves you a little bit of time. And when you're actually starting a session at this time of year, in the margins, the deep margins, you don't want loads and loads of bait on the bottom. It's going to be really tricky to catch. And one thing I will stress is I've not actually fed a single thing, and I'd always be looking to fish this later on in the session. So whenever I've got, say, 2.5 hours left of the match or my pleasure day, that's when I'll be targeting it. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to kick it off, not fed a thing, I've not primed it up or anything, and I'm going to start on a grain of sweet corn, literally hook a grain of sweet corn on. I like to pick the biggest grain that I can see. I just think it's nice, visual, and just stands out potentially if it's on the bottom with a few smaller grains. Nice big bit of sweet corn, hook through the middle, and I've actually buried my hook all in that sweet corn, so that's another little tip. You might be using a 12 hook today, but a lot of it's buried. Just make sure the point's just sticking out, and that'll give you maximum chance of when you do get a bite, you're going to hook into the fish. And now, I'm not going to feed with a pole cup or anything like that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little pole pot on the end of my pole. It's a medium one. And I'm going to pop it on, and I'm going to put about 5 or 6 grains of sweet corn. That'll do. Might have been 7, but let me off. And that's all I'm going to do. So all I'm kicking it off with, because I don't want loads of bait on the bottom, but I want to set a lovely little trap, and then I'll set my stopwatch, give it 5 minutes, see where I'm at then. So this is the first drop in, but I hope you understand the fact that I'm not wanting to feed loads of bait at this time of year. I'm just going to literally feed a little tiny parcel of bait, got my far bank marker, got my pole right underneath my elbow, and I'm literally going to cut them 4 or 5 grains in. Now this is a good little tip. Make sure you drag your rig and your float to the right of your peg, so I'm actually in the main depth of water there, and now I'm going to drag my pole float right over the top of them grains of corn, and what that'll do is it'll just sit perfectly and set a lovely little trap. Set my stopwatch. So now my grain of corn's just sitting at the bottom of that slope. One key thing that I've learned over the years doing this style of fishing is you don't want loads and loads of bait on the bottom. When you're only trying to catch 4 or 5 fish, in the early spring there's not going to be tons of fish coming into your peg, so if you've got loads and loads of bait on the bottom, it's just going to make those fish harder to catch. Your hook bait's going to be a little bit less selective, so they're going to ignore your hook bait because they've got a lot of free offerings. So having a few particles on the bottom with your hook bait right in the middle is the best way I've found of catching these wary carp, because like I said, clear, it's a little bit cold, they're going to be a bit crafty. So I've just given that first chuck about 6 minutes. So I've brought her back in. I'm going to feed a few more grains. That's what I'm going to look to do, just have them little 5-minute windows where I'm going to come back in and feed a few grains of corn, but I don't want tons and tons of bait on the bottom. So as the session goes on, I might start giving it, say, 6-minute chucks. I'm going to turn her over. Still really clear. Just seen nearly all of them grains of corn falling. So now I'm going to pull that hook bait and rig right over the top of where that corn's landed, aiming to try and just literally rest it on that slope, so when a carp does pick it up, it's going to bolt off. You'll see from my float right now, I like to have probably half of the bristle showing of my pole float, and that again, it just reduces the chance of me lifting into a liner. And when it does fire under really, really fast, I don't think it matters if you've got half of your bristle showing, because the bites are so aggressive. You're fishing with really, really heavy bait. I've got a grain of corn, potentially double corn. I don't need to be lifting at every tiny little indication. I'm only going to strike at really fast bites. When it is the early spring like it is now, one piece of advice I'll give you is make sure you fish quite far away from yourself if you can, like 7-8 metres minimum. You're not going to catch a load of carp right on a top kit. It's not in the heat of summer. The fish are still a bit cute, so fishing that little bit further away from yourself. I'm about 12.5 metres here, but I'm fishing up to cover, and I think if I didn't have that amount of cover, or if I had a next peg platform, I'd just fish up to it, but make sure it's a little bit further away from yourself, because the fish will naturally be quite wary of, you know, your commotion on your box, the noise. So fishing that little bit further away will just give you maximum chance of catching. Oh, 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 oh. That was a lot hairier than I thought it was going to be. First fish hooked, and it was pulling like mad for that tree. I think red hydro was a good choice, and the good thing about red hydro is it just tames them, like you've just seen. So when they do bolt off, you've got that control in the fish. As long as you match it up to the right hook and rig and everything like that. Oh, it's a lovely ghoster. Mint fish, that. That's a cracker. Here we go. First fish of the session. Yoo-hoo! Lovely, it's like a little koi carp. Ah, lovely, about 5 pound maybe. Just goes to show, feeding a little tiny pile of bait next to nothing has resulted in a beautiful little carp. But this time of year, you don't want loads and loads of bait on the bottom. Keep it nice and simple, set a little trap, and you'll definitely catch more of these beauties. When you have had your first fish, it's a case of just repeating that process. I'm not looking to now suddenly think, oh, I've caught one, I'm going to big pot it. I'm going to completely just repeat everything I've done, because it's worked. Got quite an instant response. It's not been as quick as I had hoped, but it's not been very long. And I know for a fact that this is the best way of attacking it at this time of year. I don't want loads and loads of bait on the bottom. I just want to set little traps and try to really give myself a good chance that if and when the fish do come into my peg, my hook bait's not going to be like in a load of other bait that they can just get away with and eat. So I'm going to rattle in those few grains of corn, be nice and accurate. There we go. And now it's a case of letting my rig settle in the deeper water. I'm just going to drag it up that slope again because that bite was lovely and clean, like shot under 1,000,000 miles an hour, and that's exactly what you're looking for. Don't be tempted to lift any sort of little sideways movements or anything like that. Just wait for a proper positive bite. You're going to get your fish in the mouth and give yourself a good chance of getting it in the net. That were a lovely fish to kick off the day though. A lot of the time it's, ooh, an indication straight away there. There's a few fish coming now. See them little tiny dinks on my float? I'm not interested, I'm not wanting to strike at those. The only bites I'm going to strike at are real fast shoot unders. Don't be tempted to strike at them. You do your peg a lot, you know, more harm than good by striking at them bites. I think you spook fish off as well. Just be nice and patient, sit there, get locked in and wait for a proper positive bite. That feels a better fish. That felt really heavy when I hooked that. Whew. That is perfect proof of how feeding literally 10p's worth of bait can just result in a brilliant day's sport. Because that's a massive carp, it's wrapped up on itself. It's going to come round. I can see the grain of corn out of its mouth. Lovely common that is. Whew, that is absolute massive. Wow, that is what spring edge fishing is all about. Look at that, that is absolutely huge. Wow, that is a massive carp. Get in. Look at that for a carp. It's absolutely massive and perfect proof of how feeding tiny bits of bait can result in big fish like this one. I've probably fed about 10p's worth of sweet corn today and the fishing has been unreal.